So news broke over the weekend that Mark Warner and some senators were going to call a huddle and Hakeem Jeffries was going to meet, and they met over the weekend to see what's going on with Joe Biden. And Joe Biden was not happy about any of this, so he released for the public yesterday morning a letter that he sent to his fellow Democrats. This morning, I sent the letter to my fellow Democrats on Capitol Hill.
Should have seen the first draft. All work and no play make Joe a dull boy just 1,000 times.
1,000 times, yes. I shared my thoughts about this moment in our campaign. It's time to come together, move forward as a united party, and defeat Donald Trump. So there's a lot of text. We're not going to read all of this because the large bulk of this is just basically a campaign speech touting all the things that he deserves so much credit for. We're not really interested in that. But the significant parts we will take a look at here. Fellow Democrats, now that you have returned from the July 4th recess, I want you to know that despite all the speculation in the press and elsewhere, I am firmly committed to staying in this race, to running this race to the end, and to beating Donald Trump. I have had extensive conversations with the leadership of the party, elected officials, rank and file members, and most importantly, Democratic voters over these past 10 days or so. I have heard the concerns that people have, their good faith fears and worries about what is at stake in this election. I am not blind to them. Believe me, I know better than anyone the responsibility and the burden the nominee of our party carries. I carried it in 2020 when the fate of our nation was at stake. I also knew these concerns come from a place of real respect for my lifetime of public service and my record as president, and I have been moved by the expressions of affection for me from so many who have known me well and supported me over the course of my public life. I've been grateful for the rock-solid, steadfast support from so many elected Democrats in Congress and all across the country, and taken great strength from the resolve and determination I've seen from so many voters and grassroots supporters, even in the hardest of weeks. I can respond to all this by saying clearly and unequivocally, I wouldn't be running again if I did not absolutely believe I was the best person to beat Donald Trump in 2024. We had a Democratic nomination process, and the voters have spoken clearly and decisively. I received over 14 million votes, 87% of the votes cast across the entire nominating process. I have nearly 3,900 delegates, making me the presumptive nominee of our party by a wide margin. I love this. This was a process open to anyone who wanted to run. Yeah, I mean, who the fuck you think you're... Only 3 people chose to challenge me.
Yeah.
One fared so badly that he left the primaries to run as an independent. Another attacked me for being too old and was soundly defeated. The voters of the Democratic Party have voted. They have chosen me to be the nominee of the party. Do we now just say this process didn't matter? That the voters don't have a say? You literally told New Hampshire you were canceling the primary and invalidating their votes, that whatever delegates were won at New Hampshire would not be seated because they jumped the line and went first.
Right. Well,
after you switched the calendar around to put South Carolina first. So you literally told the first in the nation primary state that their votes did not matter. That was literally word from you. And
right.
You wanted it that way.
And they canceled
the
the other primaries too.
Yeah, anybody who went before South Carolina. And yes, I mean, look, the idea that this was open to anyone who wanted to run, that's just not how primaries
of course not.
Work when there's an incumbent. And now there's been a little bit of relitigation, not much, because of the absurdity of the candidates who threw their hat in the ring, namely Marianne and then Dean Phillips at the last minute. This was long after RFK had already said, fuck this, I'm out. Those were unserious campaigns. I mean, in the case of Marianne and Dean Phillips, really, I mean, the only people who would throw their hat in the ring are the people who are not serious candidates, because anyone who had a serious chance to win knew this was not open to anyone who wanted to run. Right. That's the whole point. It never is when there's an incumbent. It was actually Joe Biden who said when he was running in 2020 that he was running as a transitional figure, which implied, didn't state outright, but it implied strongly that he would step down after one term, in which case it would have been a truly open process to the extent that the Democrats run fair and open processes. Wink, wink. But then you would have had a field. You would have had a field of candidates. The reason you only had Dean Phillips, RFK for a while, and Marianne is because you shut everybody out from before day one. Everyone knows that.
Well, and this is what they do, because in the end, the Democratic Party as an institution is not even really about winning elections. It's about creating wealth and power for its members and officials. And that's why they keep doing this. This is not the first time. Some people say, well, they didn't have an open primary because you have a sitting president. They never do that when you have a sitting president. Okay, so what about 2016? We know 2 years before the primaries, they cleared the field for Hillary. That's why Biden wasn't in 2016.
That's a good
He
point.
wanted to run. They sat him down and like, no, it's Hillary this time. Sorry.
Yeah.
You're going to have to take a back seat. That's why only Bernie and other candidates who were not
no one ever heard of, right,
big insiders were willing to run. Nobody who cared about their future in the Democratic Party and keeping these people happy was willing to run. So with their brilliant strategery, they keep losing elections, but they don't really care in the end. They would rather have Donald Trump than Bernie Sanders. And extending that out further, they would rather have a candidate in their pocket than to leave open these nominating processes to the vagaries of whatever the voters might choose.
Yes. Good point, Charles. We need that. We need that sound drop ready for next time. We
gotta pull that,
because it's true. I didn't even think of that. But even in 2016, when it was theoretically an open primary, it really wasn't, because what was it? The Ready for Hillary PAC made a deal with the state
O'Malley. O'Malley was that
O'Malley, Chafee, the guy Jim Webb, the military guy, and Sanders. That was it. But yeah, it was I think it was Ready for Hillary. It was a Hillary super PAC that cut a deal with the state Democratic parties to donate to the Hillary PAC. Instead of beefing up their own state parties, and then they would get a cut of that PAC money on the back end. You know who actually first reported that? Donna Brazile got all the credit for it. No, she got all the credit for it because it was in her book. You know who actually reported that in real time? Margot Kidder. And no one took her seriously because she happens to be a little crazy. But she actually worked. Well, she was. I think she has since died. Yes, she wrote an article. Well, she worked with the Montana State Democratic Party, and she wrote a piece on that at the time. And so I shared it on Facebook, but no one printed it because she is who she is. But she was actually first on that, not Donna Brazile. Donna Brazile got the credit for it.
So you're telling me that Lois Lane broke the story?
She did. She broke the story. Lois Lane had the scoop. That was her story. Absolutely. I remember that. In fact, I should find that. We should read that on the air because that was.
Well, and this is the thing that Blue Anon will never look at or contemplate because it would just cause too much cognitive dissonance. If the DNC got out of the way, there never would have been a Trump presidency. And I'm going to be completely fair and down the middle here. I'm not even going to tell you in an open primary it would have been Bernie. In fact, it probably wouldn't have. It probably would have been Biden.
It probably would have been Biden.
Back in 2016, he was coherent.
Yep.
And he plays that bullshit of being Joe from Scranton that people were in the mood for then. What would the Democratic voters have gone for? A Democratic socialist? Bernie only got as far as he got because Hillary was so fucking repulsive.
Right. And Biden was the incumbent VP. Biden would have had it.
Yeah. He would have had it. There never would have been a Trump presidency. Now this is that redux. This is that karma come down to bite the Democrats again. So in 2020, Bernie certainly would have been the nominee that year if Obama had not done the Monday Night Massacre. Okay, so you propped up this guy that let's not kid ourselves. They knew that he was losing it already. Right. But they figured they could install him as a puppet, which is exactly what they did. But now they're in a position where you got Joe Biden with his monumental Nixonian class resentments and with half his brain gone, refusing to resign. And this is the position they put themselves in by foisting him on the public in 2020. Now you're stuck with this.
Exactly. So he says, do we now just say this primary process that he just touted didn't matter? The voters don't have a say. I decline to do that. I feel a deep obligation to the faith and the trust of the voters of the Democratic Party have placed in me to run this year. It was their decision to make. Before the primary, forget about before this last disaster of a meltdown that you just had in front of 50 million people with Donald Trump on the stage. Before the primary, 70% of Democrats said they didn't want you to seek a second term. So the idea that they chose to put their trust in you, they voted for you because MSNBC told them to.
Yep.
They never wanted to.
As you point out, 70% didn't want him, but 70% voted
for him anyway. Exactly. Yes. Yes. So what? They didn't place trust in you. They voted for you because the TV man told them to. Not the press, not the pundits, not the big donors, not any selected group of individuals, no matter how well-intentioned. The voters, and the voters alone, decide the nominee of the Democratic Party. How can we stand for democracy in our nation if we ignore it in our own party? That deserves a Rappaport sound drop. I just don't have it handy at the moment. But that is something else.
Yes, the level of hypocrisy is stunning.
Stunning. How can we stand for democracy in our nation if we ignore it in our own party? I cannot do that. There we go. I will not do that. So, okay, now this skips ahead. All right, so the big body of the piece is that he went on to tout all of his accomplishments and his records. At the end, he says, once again, my fellow Democrats, we have the record, we have the vision, and the fundamental commitment to America's freedoms and our democracy to win. The question of how to move forward has been well aired for over a week now, and it's time for it to end. We have one job, and that's to beat Donald Trump. We have 42 days to the Democratic Convention and 119 days to the general election. Any weakening of resolve or lack of clarity about the task ahead only helps Trump and hurts us. It is time to come together, move forward as a unified party, and defeat Donald Trump. Sincerely, Joe Biden. To which AOC actually in a press conference, I didn't see this in time to pull the video, but she says this is now a settled matter. Joe Biden is going to be the nominee. So she just folded like an end. It's amazing how like the insurgents are the first to actually fold.
Yeah.
Right. It's actually the right wing Democrats like Mark Warner, who is basically a Republican. He's now trying to get Biden out, and you have the progressives now saying, well, maybe this is the way it has to be. I don't believe this. I still do not believe this. I believe that if you look at this the way like a episode of like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Bernie too. They interviewed him over the weekend about this. I support the president. He had a bad debate. Nobody. Oh, come on, man. So pathetic. They're all so pathetic. I think part of the reason for that is people like Joe Manchin, for example. They're on the establishment supports them. They don't have as many enemies. Somebody like AOC, now Jen Psaki will give her a foot rub in an interview. They're not going to give her the treatment like they used to. But these people don't forget. Look at Elizabeth Warren.
Of course.
Look at Elizabeth Warren. She completely debased herself, and they never gave her shit. What you cross these people once, that's it. You'll never be an insider.
No. My theory on this, though, is I'm still saying he's out in about a week and a half, because I see this as, if you ever watch like the Ninja Turtles cartoons, who are the first people that like Shredder sends out to beat the Turtles? It's the foot soldiers, the incompetent, stumbling
the bumblers,
idiots who have no chance, and they just beat them and whack them around. And then you get to, the Bebop and the Rocksteady, and then you get to the guy with the brain in his stomach, right? Krang, whatever he is. And then Shredder is at the end of the game or at the end of the show. The Democrats are doing the same thing. They're seeing if they can get the foot soldiers to convince him to drop out. Because if you're the Democrats, ideally, you don't want Barack Obama to have to chime in on this. You don't want Hakeem Jeffries to have to chime in on this. You don't want Schumer, Pelosi. You don't want any of the top brass to have to come out and say that Biden can't win. You don't want that for a couple of reasons. One, it's just an embarrassment. But two, those are pieces of sound you can't take back if he decides not to drop out, right? If Barack Obama comes out and, puts out on Instagram, Joe, we thank you for your lifelong commitment to our country, but it's time to drop out. That is advertising gold for the Republicans if Biden stays in. Right. Yep. And even if he drops out, it's embarrassing to have the leader of the party come out and take the ball. So you would ideally like for Mark Warner to be able to huddle in a closed door room and say, we got to get him out. And he drops out. But that doesn't seem to have happened. He seems to have swatted those foot soldiers away. So now it's going to escalate, and it's my belief that the party leadership is not going to blink first. I don't think I am convinced that Schumer, Jeffries, Pelosi, and Obama and James Clyburn all want him out, and I believe they will make that opinion known if they have to. They hope they don't have to. Perhaps they will, because this guy is a stubborn prick who, as we'll see in the next segment, has a lifelong resentment for the Democratic elite because they always look down on him because he's always been kind of a dumb guy.
Yeah. This was a late breaking story right before we went on, but Congress met, and according to the reporting, the Democrats met.
Right.
According to the reporting, the majority of them are still backing Biden. Now, of course, that will change if their leadership tells them they need to think differently about it. But apparently, even behind closed doors, the leadership is not telling them that yet. I have said from the beginning, Biden is not going to go willingly. They are going to have to find a leverage point. I think the best way to get to him is through his family. They're a bunch of carny grifters. If they can figure out the right thing to offer them, they'll tell him to step down, and that would probably do it. But as long as his family is telling him to fight on, I don't think he'll step out without a 25th Amendment remedy. I really don't. And honestly, with the Democrats, I always say you'll never lose money betting on them doing the worst thing they could possibly do. Don't bet that they will not run him. Don't bet on it. Don't bet on it. When the alternative is Kamala, which whatever they're trying to say in public, whatever they're whispering to their goons in the media to write these puff pieces about what a great candidate she would be, they know what they'd have on their hands with Kamala. So don't assume that they're definitely going to decide to push him out. They might decide to try to drag him over the finish line in November and then make Kamala the president.
I mean, this has been my prediction for about a year now. I'm certainly not going to abandon it now. I'm sticking to it. Now
I'm not saying that's likely.
We're moving the ball down the field,
I'm not saying that's the most likely scenario.
Now? No fucking way.
Yeah.
We're going to the end zone.
I'm not saying it's the most likely scenario, but I'm not saying it's as out of the question as we're kind of discussing.
No, it's not out of the question, but I mean, the thing that so the thing that would put it out of the question is if these big money donors, these Disney heiresses and these Ari Emanuels said, listen, we're not blinking first. We're not giving this party a dime if he's on the top of the ticket, because money talks in the Democratic
Party. Or we're only
Party,
giving it to Congress and the Senate, but hey.
No, the Disney said she's not donating it at all. Forget Congress, Senate. We're not investing in the party.
Most of them are not saying that, though. Yeah. They're saying they won't give to the presidential campaign.
Yeah.
If the money's still coming into the Congress and the Senate, and you've got this guy, literally, you're going to have to take him out with the 25th Amendment, they might just let it go and let him go all the way to November as long as their bread is buttered.
Please clap.